are back for another season of Birds of a Feather. That's Birds with a Y and Birds with an I. It's me and Amy Bird discussing all things related to the church, discipleship, gender, and getting into the real controversies. You know, I feel like it's the TV show The View, and it's just
okay.
the two of us. And I'm the Whoopi Goldberg, but without the anti-Semitism.
I just don't want to be the Joy Behar.
I actually don't know who that is. I know of The View. I don't actually watch it. I'd say it's more like that I'm Conan O'Brien, but maybe like a foot shorter. I don't know. I mean, do you have a natural television star, movie star that you identify with?
I don't. I guess I need to think about that one.
I was going to go on a limb. I'll go on a limb, maybe because I just saw a movie with her in it.
Okay.
Could you identify with Jennifer Aniston?
Yeah. I'll be the Jennifer Aniston.
Okay, well, I'll be the Conan O'Brien. I'm saying that only because of the hair color. I thought you had a similar hair color to Jennifer. Okay, well, that's all right. Okay, well, I think we've now established a comical rapport with our audience.
Moving on, what shall we talk about today, Mike?
One thing would come up. I've been getting a lot of invitations to speak on American podcasts and shows, and Americans seem to love hearing Australians pointing out all of their idiosyncrasies and everything that's wrong with them. And I'm always very happy to oblige.
I know you are. Very generous.
But I do it out of love, because I love America, because this is the land, like I said, this is the land of Chick-fil-A. This is the land that saved Australia in the Second World War. And I really do love my American friends, but some of them be, as the kids say, a little bit totes cray-cray. So not all of them. So I like to kind of, offer some.
So what's bugging you lately?
Well, what's been bugging me to be honest, the last 10 years is the way some American evangelicals conflate the inerrancy of the text with the inerrancy of their interpretation. Now, I saw that a long time ago in, a whole bunch of different debates in biblical studies where so-and-so would get a certain interpretation of something that people didn't like. And he was then accused not of having a bad interpretation, but of denying inerrancy. But where I see that increasingly more often now is in the context of the egalitarian debate, where people who are egalitarian or even just sort of question some of the complementarian readings, such as your illustrious and wise self, often get accused of denying inerrancy. Or if someone offers something that's not quite the normal complementarian view, they then get challenged. So then, where do you stand on inerrancy?
Because it's almost like complementarianism is a litmus test for whether or not you uphold the inerrancy of Scripture.
Yeah, and this is the thing that boggles my mind. I mean, you can hold to inerrancy. I mean, I hold to inerrancy or something very close to it, depending on how you define and pass it out. And I come to a more egalitarian reading of the New Testament. I've got friends and colleagues who are what I would call soft complementarians. I mean, they're happy to have women speak in church and women in ministry, even to the priesthood, but they maybe think, maybe the highest office like senior pastor or bishop, they might reserve them in for, all sorts of reasons. So there's a spectrum of complementarianism, but the complementarians don't necessarily go kind of nuclear on each other. It's not like the hard ones are accusing the soft ones of denying inerrancy.
Well, I would say that the hard ones would accuse what you're calling a soft complementarian of being a soft egalitarian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it just even boggles my mind that this debate keeps coming up. Like, if you want to challenge or critique an egalitarian reading, I mean, that's fine. You can do that. But then to bring out the kind of inerrancy charge, I think for my mind, it brings it into a kind of a circling the wagons tribalization of the issue and trying to say X is really about Y. Okay. And that's what I've noticed. People who preach the inerrancy of the text what they often mean is the inerrancy of their interpretation and the hegemony of their tribe in particular context.
Right.
And I think that explains so much of the heat that you get, Amy, that it's not a matter of biblical interpretation. It's all about the hegemony. It's all about the boundaries of the tribe and its own kind of series of fortifications and gatekeepers. So
yeah, I was accused very often of using egalitarian hermeneutics. And I thought, what in the world's that? I mean, I think that's another thing that they're kind of using. And then that gets connected with the inerrancy / biblical authority, doctrine of scripture. And I mean, they associate complementarianism with the gospel even. So
yeah, I know.
I mean, so it does make it very hard. You don't get to have the actual discussion that you want to have looking in the biblical text. Instead, you're defending, yes, I uphold the authority of scripture. That's why I'm saying what I'm saying, but for them, it just discounts your entire argument. And lately, we've seen that on social media with Beth Allison Barr and Kristen Dumais. I think it was Denny Burke who recently.
It was Denny, who I think should know better, to be honest. And a whole bunch of other people were also bringing out the same argument, and various pastors. There was one in North Carolina who was doing it. Like, you can be a complementarian church, or you can be one that rejects biblical authority. And I'm going like, dude, is there like an option C here? Because those are not the only two shows in town.
Well, and Burke is the president of the Council of Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, which, I mean, they get a lot of shared platforming with, some major complementarian seminaries and things like this. So, it's not just this extreme or, this fringe that's saying this. But then you've also got Beth Barr shared a really good article written by Stephen Young on Religion Dispatches. Did you read that? It was called Biblical Inerrancy's History as an Evangelical Activist for White Patriarchy.
Yeah,
very interesting.
I did see that. It was slightly more acidic and acerbic than I would put it, but I think that the main point certainly holds.
Right.
That inerrancy has been used for the authority of social groups and their interpretation, not just about the authority.
That hegemony you're talking about.
Yeah. So
the integrationists or the interracial marriage, those arguments were argued because of biblical authority, against them.
Exactly.
But yeah, so he's quoting like Ligon Duncan, who said that the denial of complementarianism undermines the church's embrace of inerrancy. Yeah. Mark Dever, Denny Burke. I mean, so these are some pretty big names in evangelical Christianity.
And they should know better. People should know. Theologians, biblical scholars know that there is a difference between the text, its interpretation, and its application and its authority. I mean, here's the thing: no one accuses, Credo Baptists of denying inerrancy. I mean, even if you're a pedo Baptist like us, the way
that's a good point. Right.
We don't accuse, Credo Baptists of undermining biblical authority, or we say, so you only got baptized as a believer. Well, then the onus is on you to prove that you believe in inerrancy because you got baptized as a believer. I mean, no one makes that.
We don't do that with our eschatology.
Oh, yeah, eschatology,
biblical government.
Yeah, church government, elders, deacons. I mean, they only bring out the inerrancy card in the context of this sort of gender debate. And, and that's the thing that just baffles me, because it's so blatantly obvious. So that's the thing.
You're out.
Yeah, that's the thing I don't get. And I mean, Stephen's article in a very forthright way really brought that out. And I think that's a sad thing. But people keep asking me to do podcasts talking about this very issue. I went on to the whole.
You have a good chapter of it in your book. 7 Things I Wish People Knew About the Bible. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the things. And for me, the big issue today is, I mean, I see this Generation Z, and the issues for them are not, is the Bible inerrant or not? The issue for the younger generation is the Bible an oppressive book? That is, I mean, if you don't believe me, go watch, what is it? Abraham Piper's TikTok videos, John Piper's son. Go watch his TikTok video, mocking the Bible. So do you believe in inerrancy or infallibility? The people who are done or nuns, that's not what they're wrestling with about religion in society. It's more the idea, is the Bible just acutely oppressive, which is why I love Dan Kimball's book, How Not to Read the Bible. I mean, I'd give that to every Generation Z kid I can find, because it's dealing with that kind of meme culture that mocks the Bible. So but that segues into a good point. If we don't want our young people to end up that way, then what we need is good discipleship. Now, I know that's a theme that's very important to you, Amy. What do you think is the number one thing churches should have if they're thinking about discipleship, or what makes for a good discipleship program?
I think that's a layered question. I don't know about a number one thing, but I think even just good definitions of what discipleship is and what it entails. I think that's something the church really needs to kind of define for their congregants. And it has to start with, I think, good worship. The preached word and the sacraments is where discipleship is going to flow out of, right? So obviously that's the most,
where it starts, but it ends at voting Republican. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's where there's this strange, I've just really had a heart, I think, for disillusioned disciples. There's all this talk about deconstruction and deconversions, and whether or not to use the word deconstruction and all those kinds of things. And, I definitely have a heart for people leaving the church too, but there are so many, I think you see on social media, hurting people in the church who are trying to make sense of what just happened in their lives. They went to the church for help, or they wanted to, be contributing as a disciple. They want to be invested in as disciples. And a lot of marginalized people, and these are large groups of people, like women who make up over half of the church, are now leaving the church at the highest percentage rate. All the marginalized races that aren't white, who don't feel like that they can contribute and be invested in the same way. Young people too, I think. You see, we've focused so much on youth groups, but we haven't really connected them in with the body. We don't look at them as if they have contributions that we can learn from too, that we can be blessed by too. I think that there's class issues, there's political, the church has been so tied to this political factioning. So I just think that there's all these questions and pain. And, what you're saying with Generation Z, I feel like it's not only is the Bible oppressive, but can I trust the church?
Yeah.
So I think these are some pretty big questions. People are looking for belonging and friendship in the church. And I think that there's, especially maybe in the Reformed-ish churches, there's this emphasis on this theology with propositional statements, right? Which we need the propositional statements. We need the boundaries of what we believe, the confession of what we believe. But somehow we've missed the love that's offered in all of that, and the joy and the wonder and the curiosity and imagination and beauty and all these other things. And so I would love to be able to see all that be put together then in what we're teaching about God in the church, and valuing all the voices there.
I think if I had to sum up what you've said, I think what we need is for church leaders have to realize every person is worth discipling. Okay, that's one thing.
Yes.
Everyone is worth discipling. Not the case of, okay, we're going to focus discipleship on the young men because they are the future, or, or whatever, or the baby boomer guys because they provide all the money or whatever it is. But you've got to recognize that everyone from, across the whole spectrum of giftedness, abilities, backgrounds, classes, wherever they are, they're all worth discipling. I think that discipling is also got to be done in a way that creates a community that is led by the Spirit and bears the fruits of the Spirit, which includes things like not just being right, being loving. And the number one thing I learned, as an early seminary grad, one of the first mistakes I make is one thing I learned is it's better to be loving than to be right. And that's probably the number one thing I got, I had to learn after seminary, because I loved my theology, loved my Reformed theology, because I was young, restless, and reformed. And I learned through maturity, I think it's better to be loving than it is to be right. And if I'm summing up what you're saying as well, the other thing we need is to make sure it's not just learning theology statements, but living out. And this is where I've got a good quote. You may like this quote, and people watching may want to memorize it the way I have. It's something I got from Kevin Van Hootzer, reading his book, The Drama of Doctrine. He says that the purpose of theology, or you could say the purpose of discipleship, is that those who bear Christ's name would learn to walk in Christ's way. I think that's a good way of summarizing discipleship and theology, learning the propositions, knowing the confession, knowing, what it is we believe about God is instrumental. Okay. In other words, it's not an end in itself. Theological knowledge is instrumental for conformity to the pattern and the image of Christ. Yeah. And often we think that knowing the theology is an end of itself. And some things, the application for some stuff may not always be apparent, but it always does have outcomes. So yeah, I mean that's sort of,
Yeah, I think too. I mean, and I don't want to say this is like all churches or anything like that, but what got me into writing in the first place is just trying to find a place to be a thinking woman in the church. And as I've gotten into this corner of the church now of writing, I find it very interesting that we need to, I'm trying to think how to say this. It's important to value, obviously we know we need pastors, and we see the value of academia. But I think that we kind of are missing the value of the layperson's voice in the conversation too, because you don't see, none of us do, what everybody else sees. And so, a lot of the lay people, it's for them, they're the ones out in the world trying to make ends meet and have these big life questions that they're coming to the church trying to make sense of the world, So I think that, that's one big part of it too, is, and part of the enfleshed love part of it is to value the voices of the lay people in the church too.
Yeah, well, I hope no one accuses me of being Baptist, but this is where the doctrine of the priesthood of all believers actually, I think, is
yes. I agree.
Because the Spirit,
but there's such hierarchy sometimes that it's hard to, remember that we're all loving the same God and wanting to grow together, and in our desire for Him.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. But some of these people are disillusioned. Many people have been hurt by churches, or they haven't been cared for, which has also been, I think, amplified by the pandemic. I mean, even the best of pastors I know have struggled to look after their flock during the pandemic, and I've seen some very different responses. Some people trying to do all their pastoring from their own room, which if you're locked down, you kind of have to. But I had one student who was going house to house doing like communion in people's front yards for them, and
wow,
so there's different ways of it. And one thing I tell my students, I say this in the context of like preaching and ministry, is people are not going to remember most of your sermons. They'll remember a few sayings, a few illustrations, a few impressions you made. The main thing the people will remember is how you treated them. That's the number one thing that your congregation will remember about you. It's not so much your theology, your confession, or your great oratory skills. Most of the time, it's going to be how you made them feel is the main thing they'll take away. And I mean, that can lead to a sort of a felt needs approach, I know. But just caring for people is still the number one job of pastoring. And if we're doing that well, then the sheep are less likely to flee if they're being well tended and well fed. But if they're being fleeced, or if you are being thrown to the wolves and the other sheep are watching going, well, I don't want to be the next sheep thrown to the wolves, so I'm out of here. And you can understand how that happens. But there's also another class, I would say. There's not just, I mean, you've got the deconstructors, you've got the people who are disillusioned. In the New York Times, David Brooks wrote an article about these dissenters, people who are trying to save evangelicalism. And I think in Brooks' context, he thinks those who have kind of merged their faith with a kind of sort of right-wing civil religion, a mixture of, nationalism, and politics, that type of a thing, which is generally not healthy. But some people are kind of doing, a pushback on that, since, the purpose of evangelicalism broadly is not simply to provide religious capital to a certain sector of the political spectrum. I mean, it should be to, promote Christ's kingdom and his gospel. I mean, that's what it should be. And Brooks goes through several people who are pushing back on certain elements of evangelicalism. This is where he gets the Christian Dumais, I think Karen Swallow Prior, Russell Moore, several other characters as well. But Al Mohler had a critical response to that. I mean, Amy, should you have been in that article? Are you one of the dissenters calling us back to friendship? Because if I thought anyone who should be on that list, it probably should have been Amy Bird. Because you are one of the dissenters who are trying to bring us back to a better way of having male and female relationships. Hence your book, Why Can't We Be Friends? Is that the right title? Is that, did I get the title right? Why Can't We Be Friends? And recovering from biblical manhood and womanhood. Still, I say best book title ever. Much better.
Still recovering.
Much better than the book title I pitched to a publisher called "The Case for Your Best Life Now: Holy Shack Code of the 7 Levels of the Jabez Prayer for Us Washing Your Face."
That could sell.
Yeah,
for us washing your face.
That was the other name for a book I pitched. That
kind of like the Puritan length titles, right?
Yes, that one didn't get. But I mean, you're a kind of dissenter too, and you've paid a big price for that dissent, a very big price. And because you're not Samson trying to bring down the temple of the Philistines, you're just trying to reset things, refocus, bring the church to better discipleship, a more chastened care for men and women together in the church, and in rethinking the value and role of women while still operating in a fairly conservative theological orbit. So, what is your dissent? I mean, if there was a paragraph about you in the David Brooks article, Amy, what would your paragraph have been?
Oh man, I guess it would have been about a call to restore the dignity and personhood of, everybody in the church. That's really what I'm trying to do in my writing. And
sounds like critical race theory.
I'm not.
Sounds like critical race theory. I don't know what critical race theory is, but that sounds like what it would be if it is something.
Yes, and that's the thing. Like by saying dissenter, I don't know, it gives you a negative tone already, right? I like what.
If you're in an asylum where it's full of crazy people, being a dissenter, I think, is a good idea. Like, no, the sky is not falling. I'm going to dissent on that one.
I mean, I don't know. Like, why isn't it a more positive name, like, a
The
genuine
reform.
invitation to something more biblical.
Well, what term would you then? The dissenters, the Jezebel Alliance.
Well, I really do like, and this doesn't fit all the names though in the Post article, but I really like what Scott McKnight calls wounded resistors.
Ah,
Yeah. And that is, I think not all of some of them are, you may be speaking more as advocates than the wounded,
yeah,
but you get wounded in doing it.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's right. That's right.
So what tell me what your takeaway was from Al Mohler's response, because I just skimmed a tiny bit. I didn't realize we were going to talk about that, so I would have
Yeah,
read it
I
better.
was pretty sure President Mueller does not have a subscription to the New York Times. Okay, it is not his
Oh yeah,
favorite.
the Times. I said the Post.
Yeah, it's not his favorite publication. To be honest, it's not mine either. I do find it a little elitist and a kind of just cheerleaders. Although I mean, they do get the odd good person to write for it, and I don't mind David Brooks. I mean, he had a great show. I think it was NPR with David with
I've
David.
read some of his books.
Yeah, I found that really good, and yeah, I mean, I liked it. He basically says, American evangelicalism needs to start having more concessions or conversations with evangelicals around the world, and I'm like, hey, that's my thing. That's what I've been trying.
Hello.
That's what I've been trying to do. It's like, dude, I'm right here.
Yeah.
Getting American evangelicals just to talk to people outside the world, because we don't have the same shibboleths, the same in-house debates as Americans have. We don't have these we don't have these big debates over, do you believe in inerrancy or infallibility? And we don't necessarily have. I mean, John Stackhouse said in an interview I did with him, he said something really insightful. He says, the big difference between American evangelicals and evangelicals in other countries is American evangelicals think they should be running the country, that this country is kind of ours, and it's not at the moment, and that's wrong. But I guarantee you, Christians in India don't complain that India is a Christian country and all these Hindus have taken it over and taken it away from us. Christians in India don't think like that, that they're kind of very content just to have the freedom and space to live their life without being persecuted by Hindu extremists. Okay.
Yeah.
And you can apply the same thing to, Christians in China. No one has this sense of entitlement that we should be running the country. But Mohler's main complaint, as far as I can tell, against Brooks is not one of us. He's not part of the evangelical team. And, and Brooks made a big thing about 80% of evangelicals voting for Trump. And Mohler said, well, if 80% are voting for Trump, do the math. That's where the movement is at. And, maybe that's who they are. To which I would say, I can think there are some good reasons for voting for Trump. I'd be very happy to talk about what I think were the good achievements of the administration. I could tell you the bad things of the Biden administration, hashtag Afghanistan withdrawal. But I thought Mohler completely ignored the issue that there is within American evangelicalism a really weird mix between religion, politics, civil religion, and a quest for power, and some sort of skewed views of masculinity, those sorts of things. And that's what the dissenters are against. They're not trying.
Yeah, and that they're speaking from within.
Exactly.
So like, this isn't the whole evangelical church, and what they believe. I mean, it's kind of nice to see someone who's not in, like, notice that, okay, not everyone thinks that Trump is connected to our faith.
Exactly. Or we're faithfully obligated to follow the whole thing, hook, line, and sinker, all the way down to, he really won the election, or, or we have to make sure that he gets back in office, or, or whatever it is. Again, I can understand people supporting him over, the Democrats for a whole variety of reasons. So it's not voting for him that bugs a lot of people. It's the devotion and willing to buy into the narrative and provide it with religious capital. That's the thing that is really, really, because I mean, I know some people who voted for Trump and felt dirty afterwards because they thought that the alternative was far too terrible. But it's the idea that Trump will bring us back to the seat of power that is rightly ours. That is the uniquely American thing that just strikes me as a little bit weird. You know, like, I mean, here's the thing: in Australia last night, they had a marathon parliamentary debate about a religious discrimination bill. Sadly, though, the most of the discussion was not about religious discrimination. It was mostly about religious people discriminating against LGBT people. You know, which is a fair enough debate to have. But that was the whole lens. The whole debate was through that lens. They weren't talking about Islamophobia or anti-Semitism. They weren't largely talking about churches or religious schools being vandalized. It was all through that lens of sort of LGBT rights could be infringed if we have too much religious freedom in the country, which mirrors, I know, with some debates having in your own country. But that's kind of where the debate, we're not doing this from a position of power or authority, just getting the basic, human rights, religious freedom is a big challenge in some countries. Whereas, in the United States, that's just assumed, and it's really kind of getting the reins of power that people want. And I just don't see this ending well in the long run for the American evangelical church, because I think the word evangelical is just going to become nebulous and meaningless. It's like, I think I've said this before, it's like the word evangelical is an adjective, but now the adjective needs its own adjective. You've got to describe what type of evangelical you are.
Yeah, it's so true. And the church is becoming so factioned. And sadly, a lot of it is about power.
Yeah.
And who gets to have power. And I mean, I would love for us to start having conversations about like the responsibility behind that. Any kind of authority, it's not an authority to tell people what to do or to hold over people. Or some kind of honor that you have over other people, but that it's an authority to actually serve and to love and to equip and empower others. It's to give them authority, even to authorize others. So it's just, I feel like we're talking past one another on so many ways, and it's not, we have this far right and far left, and it's not that we need a middle. I think we need a third way. And that third way is, I think, really does involve love, because theology without love is just dead. So,
Indeed.
Yeah. So how can we, actually listen and have conversation? So it would be nice to have, like, okay, if you disagree with David Brooks, instead of, going just after David Brooks, actually address the arguments more. And, maybe show where some points were made, or that the church, wow, we do have this problem here, to where these dissenters are speaking into, are we listening to what they have to say? Or is this?
Yeah, the dissenters are not trying to destroy, they're trying to edify and renew and maybe prune and call for accountability, or get us out of unhealthy relationships with the past, the political present, or certain prejudices that may masquerade in the name of religion. That they've come not to destroy.
Right. I mean, take Beth Allison Barr's book. So it's a historical critique of the church, yes, but it's also an invitation. Now, I mean, that's really the tone. What she wants there, I think, at the end, is this invitation. And you might not walk into that invitation. You might not agree with her invitation. But, I think that the treatment of just discrediting, just circling back to what we were talking about in the beginning, then these are the same names that are being labeled as, okay, they don't believe in the inerrancy of Scripture. And then even to take the whole egalitarian side of things and to say, like Ligon Duncan did, that, you know, we don't see many strongly inheritance egalitarians. What?
Well, if you look outside your circle, you can see that. Well, Amy, maybe we need our own faction. I would say we should be the love faction, but that sounds like a weird kind of yoga cult.
Yeah, true.
I do remember one episode of that previous podcast you did that I won't name. I remember you having a argument with one of your co-hosts about whether yoga was spiritual. Do you remember that?
Yeah, whether all yoga was of the devil, and whether Christians can participate in secular yoga.
Yeah.
Which I said, of course Christians can participate in secular yoga.
Yeah, well, I mean, we could create a Christian version of yoga and develop our own positions.
That's a nightmare.
Yeah, like you could have it like, I don't know, like flexing Philip the evangelist. Maybe you could have it prostrating Paul. I don't know, maybe you could invent your own Christian yoga poses. Yeah, I mean
that
sounds like a
good
business idea, Amy. Sounds like a good business idea. Could have a nice side hustle.
Yoga pants for Christians.
There is never a good time for yoga pants. More so for men. Yeah. There's you don't end up.
I will agree with you there.
You don't want to end up what's called in Australia we have a thing called mammals, middle-aged men in lycra.
No, I have not heard of that.
You've never heard mammals, middle-aged men in lycra. You don't want to see it.
No, I don't.
When I wear my bike pants, I always wear shorts over the top. But anyway, Amy, I lament that this discussion is now descending into the area of yoga apparel, which means we've probably come to the end of our discussion.
We tend to fall off the cliff at the end, don't we, Mike?
Yeah, I think we do. I think it always seems to end in something to say. But hey, we've covered some good stuff. We've covered the inerrancy and interpretation. We've talked about discipleship, disillusionment. We've talked about dissenters as well. Maybe a Christian yoga studio is the good way to end it off. Maybe it will be the Christian yoga faction. Probably not, though. Probably not. But Amy, I was going to say, well, what is there anything that this year holds for you? I know you do have a very big book launch coming out soon.
Yeah, so my book, The Sexual Reformation, is launching next month. And right before we started recording, my big box of books came. So super excited. I didn't have time to like rip it open and, smell them all. And
I mean, I smell new books and I thought, man, why would you do cocaine when you can do acid-free paper?
Yeah, right? I mean, I literally have a perfume called Paperback.
Really? I wanted to invent my own cologne endorsed by me and Tom Wright, and I was going to call it Sepulchre, the scent of crucifixion.
Oh my goodness!
I thought it would sell. I thought our own scent called our own cologne fragrance called the Sepulchre.
Oh, I just don't know. I can see the marketing.
I can see the marketing going. Yeah, Mike. I don't know if selling something that smells like a tortured, dying, crucified God man is really going to sell. And I don't know how we would replicate that. Yeah, but there we go. Okay, we got the Sexual Reformation coming out.
It's coming out. I'm super excited about it. I'm getting some opportunities to talk about it already, and a lot of my work in there comes from the Song of Songs, and I just find it very exciting. I feel like, and the subtitle is called "Restoring the Dignity and Personhood of Man and Woman," and I feel like, all the stuff we were talking about today. Just really spending time in the song and reading that as part of the canon of Scripture. So seeing all the intertextual references and echoes and allusions in there, and giving it a theological reading, I think really would be something to help the church if we were to spend more time in it. I'm actually right now working on just meditations in the song. I think that it answers so many of our questions about life and love and desire and where we're headed. So
And there's also a video series that comes out with the book.
yeah, so we're doing a promotion. I think it's if you pre-order the book. I need to get the details of that because that's got to go out pretty soon. I'll be recording some videos, so it'll be a virtual event. I think it's coming out around the same time as T4G, but we'll be doing some videos. Yeah.
I thought they were having you as a speaker. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
Or no, sorry, I've confused you with Ligon Duncan again. Sorry, I'm sorry. Easy mistake.
That's right. It's very easy mistake.
You're both Presbyterian, so it's an easy mistake to make.
Easy mistake. So yeah, I get to do some conversations. One with you, I'm excited about. I'm talking with Beth Barr and Sheila Gregore and Nijay Gupta and Tiffany Bloom. And I'm really excited to kind of not only talk about my book with you guys, but just kind of how it intersects with your own work and things like that too. So I think there's going to be a Q&A if I'm brave enough to do live. I just don't know how the questions aren't going to be screened. So
you've gone, I mean, you've defended yoga to big evangelical media. You've gone on walks on the Appalachian Mountains
today.
And you've done various things. I think you have the do it. If you do it, you get a bravery medal.
Oh well, if I get that, I'll do it.
What would be really brave would be crashing together for the gospel with copies of your book and trying to give them away.
Well, here's the funny part. You know, it's a virtual event, so we're doing it from home. But it just so happens that the next day I'm leaving for a Bourbon Trail trip with my husband and my parents and some friends. And so I will be in Louisville.
Well, I could think of there are a couple of seminaries in Louisville. I'm pretty sure you would have some sympathetic listeners down in Louisville, and it's a wonderful city. It's a beautiful city. So it's
I'm really excited. You know, I'm doing the local distilleries and doing the tours and the tastings and spending 4 days. It's gonna be fun.
Okay, that sounds terrific.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Amy, I think we all wish you well with the continued book launch, and I'll put the details for that in the show notes. So if people want to come along and join in, that'll be terrific. Well, Amy, it's always a pleasure talking to another bird, and I think
it always is
enjoyable. And I don't know what we'll cover next time. We'll see what issues have come up on the internet. Maybe you can give a report about your virtual event and who turned up and how it all went.
Okay.
Okay, and thank you for everyone for listening. Hope you've enjoyed these chats between myself and Amy. Catch you around next time.